Well, hi there, everybody. This is Bryson Jackson, Director of Groups here at University Baptist Church. So excited to be offering this training video for you. Our mission as a church is that we would be making wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ that know Him and that make Him known. One of the key ways that we do that as a church is through group ministry. And I am beyond excited that you have taken the step to begin training and equipping yourself to be a group leader through the ministry of our church. I hope that this training resource can help you think through ways that you can more effectively lead and think through what it means to host a group, whether it be at the church or in your home or wherever it is. I'm praying that you would be enriched and that you would grow on a daily basis in your ability to be able to interact with people as we engage in relational discipleship. So today our topic is facilitating good discussion. It is so important to be able to organize and manage a good discussion in order for a group to have a healthy relational environment. This is not a class. This is not a lecture. We have classes and Bible studies that we host at our church. But when we're talking about groups ministry, this is facilitating discussion. You become a facilitator, not a teacher. So what does a teacher do? A teacher does a lot more of the talking. And so if you've attended a class, it's a lecture. You've got a teacher giving information, walking through a lesson plan. When you're a facilitator, it's a very different vibe. A facilitator does much less talking. You're asking open-ended questions. When I say open-ended, I'm talking the how, when, what, where. We're not talking about clear yes or no questions. But you're asking open-ended questions that's inviting people into the discussion. That's what it means to lead a group kind of discussion rather than lecturing somebody in a classroom type of environment. So what else does a teacher do? A teacher presents information. And so when you're teaching, you've got something that you're walking through, kind of like what I'm doing with you right now, rather than a facilitator asks those leading questions and specifically works to draw people out. You're always going to have people from different backgrounds, different experiences, and we learn and they learn more effectively when they can hear from one another, hear from different perspectives, and be able to sharpen one another. This is Proverbs 27:17 in action. As iron sharpens iron, so does one brother sharpen another. We want to encourage that in our group's dynamics and enable people to lovingly, relationally care for one another and sharing their experiences and how they're growing in Christ. Number 3 there is you see that a teacher has more of a regulated and controlled kind of environment. When you are the only one talking, obviously, it's a little bit more controlled. You know where the conversation's going to go. As a facilitator, you don't really know all the time how a discussion's going to flow. You don't know how much people will engage. You might come into a growth group or a care group, and people might not be ready to share that night. It could have been a rough week. There could be all kinds of things going on. People could have the glazed over eye look and they're not really engaging. You don't know what you're going to encounter. You could ask one question and you could have a couple or an individual have a raft of things to discuss and things to kind of bring to the table that as a group you really need to zero in on that specific issue and that specific struggle that individual is going through. You don't really know what your discussion is going to look like, but what is most important is that you open up the table for that kind of relational discussion and discipleship, and then see how the Lord leads the discussion and you kind of help to manage it and put on guardrails so it doesn't completely go off the rails into a conspiracy theory or something that's off the table, but to say like, hey, we want to try to zero in and kind of guide this discussion in a specific way that would help people to be learning and learning relationally. People learn so much better when they are learning in discussion. Another area that is more of a teacher thing rather than a facilitator thing is that it's educationally oriented versus a facilitator. This is more application oriented. So if you're leading a growth group, what you're going to see in the sermon guide that is on the website that you can go and look at and then walk through, you're going to see application-driven questions. These are not questions that are usually driven towards educational purposes, but they're more leaning into application, helping people think through how what it is that they're learning meets them where they're at right now. If you come to the table as a leader thinking that you need to educate people, you're going to struggle with a lot of the application-oriented questions that we're going to be throwing at you as a church, because that's not really the purpose. So remember that as a facilitator in a growth group, you're trying to dig out application-oriented type of discussion from the people in your group. The last thing is a teacher, it's more structured. You've got things kind of laid out in a specific way, and then a facilitator, it's less structured, and that's okay. You do not have to be in control, and I'll be honest with you, that's sometimes difficult for me. I want to kind of control the way that this goes, and that's just my personality. You may be like me, but you've got to be okay with a little less control in a facilitating type of role. You're managing it, you're stewarding it, but you are not the one doing all of it. You want to invite other people to the table. So let's talk about this. What makes a good discussion question? I'm going to be offering, you're going to see like discussion questions if you work through the sermon guide, or maybe you're a care group leader and you're working from discussion questions from a book. But maybe you need to create some of these on the fly at some point. Maybe you need to help lead people in a certain direction in your group as the Lord lays it on your heart. So let's talk about what makes a good discussion question. Number one is they're open-ended in nature. If you're leading somebody towards a yes or no kind of an answer, then this is not a discussion-oriented kind of question. You want it to be open-ended so that people have to kind of work it out, think through it together. Number two is that it can be very experience-based. So an open-ended question is asking people the way that this has happened in their life. So say that I'm asking a question about, what are some ways that you've seen Christians working together in a local church? And the experience of one person in the room could be extremely different from the experience in another person in the room. Someone might say, well, my church was a part of a denomination where we would go together to church camp as kids in high school every year, and we collaborated with our students. Another person might say, well, I went to an independent Bible church and we didn't ever fellowship with anybody or work with anybody. You never know what kind of experiences are in the room, but an open-ended question is meant to draw out different experiences and think through ways that biblical principles have played out in people's lives and think through those things together. Number three is that sometimes these can be emotional or emotive, that it's not necessarily, as I said earlier, straight factual, but it can sometimes be something that makes you feel a certain way. Like when we talk about bringing people out of isolation and into depth of Christian community, there are a lot of feelings that could be there. Maybe someone who's experienced a lot of church hurt, somebody who has been really bruised by an emotionally manipulative Christian situation. You never know what kinds of things you might encounter. There could be a lot of feelings around a certain topic. Maybe something came up in a Sunday sermon related to politics or racism in our culture. You never know what kinds of things as a group leader you might need to kind of field and think through, but understand that some of these can be emotional kind of topics and things that you're wanting to work out in a biblical way. Kind of along those lines, sometimes open-ended good discussion questions can be polarizing, but I will say be careful with that, because the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be the guy who's always trying to stir up some kind of hard conversation that gets people really riled up. It's good to ask questions that produce a certain amount of tension, that really make people think, but be careful with that. Don't try to drive things so polarizing that you neglect really helping people grow relationally. The point is for your group to be talking much more than you're talking. And so some of you might struggle with that more than others. Maybe you're really comfortable with silence. Maybe you never allow silence in interpersonal conversation. No matter what your personal bend is, when you become a facilitator, you want to be encouraging conversation with other people. And that is a difficult task for some of us, to learn how to really draw that out, work that out. But I would just encourage you, start practicing open-ended discussion questions in order to help really draw people out and start thinking about how much you're talking versus how much other people in the group are talking. So my group doesn't talk. Now what? What do we do when you get a few couples in the room together and you guys are having a good time, and then the sermon guide comes out and you hear the crickets in the background. What do we talk about now? Or you ask a question and nobody wants to answer. Or maybe they give you the Christian answer. We'll get to that later. Is it Jesus, the Bible? And then move on, right? No, we want to prompt more authentic, thinking outside the box kinds of questions. So what do we do in those kinds of circumstances? Don't be afraid to prompt individual members to participate. You don't want to do this in a way that's calling people out or making people feel ashamed, but it is helpful to think through the people in the room and think through their experiences, and maybe a specific discussion question. You know someone's story and you know how it could relate to their story. Maybe you would ask them lovingly and affirmingly, but ask them for some feedback on how it affects them or how they're thinking through a specific issue. Maybe think through what is happening as you engage with them and think through how it could be affecting them, and lovingly just say, hey, like, what do you think about that? And asking those specific members is not a problem. Don't condemn or lead group members to feel their input is not beneficial. A lot of times if everyone feels like you're the smartest one in the room, and or maybe there's one person in the room who has a Bible degree or something, and everyone's like, oh, so-and-so, they've got the answer. I don't know how to answer that. You want to try to curb those kinds of situations as much as possible and encourage input from other people. When it comes, affirm it. Say, thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate you having that input. That's really beneficial for the group. And try to kind of coax that out of people with some positive reinforcement. Because if you give negative reinforcement, or they bring something to the table and then you say, that's not really it, but it's more this, then they're going to start to feel shut down. Like what they have to bring to the table is not helpful for the group. And you'll see them slowly retreat and just listen as opposed to really engaging. You want to create a safe space where people feel like they can contribute. That safe word is really important. In your group, you want things to feel safe in the sense that they can be raw. And that takes time to kind of work that out of people. People don't automatically just come into your space and feel like, man, I can share all of my deep hurt and things that are going on. It takes time to kind of cultivate that kind of care and to help show people that you are genuine. They won't talk if they feel like you will give them the answer. Now, this was a huge struggle for me early on, and I love to learn. And when I first started leading group discussion, I would ask a question, and then nobody was answering it the way that I wanted. Then I would jump in there and throw in the answer. And I'll tell you, what I learned is that if I give the answer, no one else is going to talk, because they're all going to sit back and they're just going to go, oh, well, Bryson's got it, and then I'm robbing them of the opportunity to engage and also to have feedback that maybe I wouldn't see, perspectives that maybe I wouldn't see, because I don't have the answers. You don't have all of the answers. And it's really beneficial to have that group discussion where you're hearing from different believers or even non-believers. You don't know who's coming into your group. All right, here are a few more discussion tips. Number one that we want to talk through here. Listen, I know this is hard. Don't avoid silence. It can be such a powerful, reflective, meditative type of tool. Take the time to allow a question to really sit in somebody's mind and let them mull it over for a little bit. Let them think about how it affects them. Let them think about the way that it can impact the way that we're talking about things here. So check out this quote from Robert Pizzino from Gordon Conwell. He says, the quality of student responses improves if the wait time after a teacher's question extends beyond 1 to 3 seconds to 20 seconds. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm high extrovert. And so when you have like 20 seconds of dead space, it kind of drives me up a wall and I want to say something. But understand that if you allow for that reflective space, that it can really help people from all types of learning to reflect and then come to the table with some answers. And you might hear from people who wouldn't otherwise speak if you allow for that space and really allow them to work out and think through how this affects their life. Here's another really important tip. Be an active listener. So on top of not avoiding silence, make sure that when people do speak up, that you're not acting distracted. I mean, the minute that somebody starts talking, are you looking at your phone? Are you looking at your Bible? Are you kind of, nudging the person next to you? People will shut down if you do that. Make sure that when they start talking, that you engage, you look them in the eye, and you nod, and you say, yeah, oh, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I get it, yeah. Like engage with them and show them that you care, show them that you're tracking with what they're laying down, and that you're engaging in this kind of conversation. James 1:19 says, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Make sure that you are ready to hear from the other people in your group. If you have a mentality that says, I know all the answers and I'm going to bring everything that these people need to hear, listen, you're not going to be an active listener. But if you are quick to try to pay attention, think through what other people are bringing to the table and engage with them, you'll see much more of an active discussion really take place because people feel affirmed just by you looking at them and affirming what they're saying with your nonverbal cues. Here we've got 7 key active listening skills. And so as we talk about active listening, there are a number of ways that you can engage in this. Number 1 is to be attentive. So we already talked about this. Don't be nudging people around or looking at your phone, acting like you're bored. Be attentive, be focused. Don't act tired. Might be hard if it's been a long day, but like some people just kind of shake it off, get you a cup of coffee and get ready to go. Number 2, if they're engaging, don't be afraid to ask further open-ended questions. If you're a growth group leader, you're going to have that sermon guide, and it's going to be really tempting to only use that sermon guide. But I think there needs to be liberty for you to ask leading questions if you have a group member that is engaging in a certain way. If they're working something out, don't be afraid to ask further leading questions to think through what it is that they're talking about and ways that they're bringing their perspective. Number 3 is to ask probing questions. And so if they begin to talk through, maybe they're working through a relationship that they have, maybe they're struggling in their marriage and they would say, a couple would open up in group and they'd start talking about ways that they've had conflict over the last week. Maybe you could then ask a probing question. What is it that draws that conflict to the surface? What is it that's bringing that frustration in your relationship? And then allowing them to work that out. Those kinds of probing questions can really draw the discussion forward in a way that's really powerful. Number 4 is to request clarification. And so if not only they're talking about things, but maybe you're a little unclear and you're thinking through it, and you're like, that doesn't really make sense. Why is it that this is the way that it is for you? Request clarification. Don't be afraid to think through and ask for them to kind of work something out, maybe if it's not entirely clear, and they'll feel heard and like you care as well if you're not just glossing past it and going, oh, okay, and then moving on. But to request some clarification and trying to dig into exactly what's going on there is really important. Number 5, you can also paraphrase. Like you can say, oh, okay, so if I'm understanding you right, this is what you're thinking. Like to kind of put it back to them and have that active discussion. Number 6 is to be attuned to and reflect feelings. Understand that, once again, we talked about how group dynamics, this is not a intellectual exercise as much as some of you might be inclined to make it that. This is more of a feelings kind of a discussion, and to be attuned to what's going on in that moment is really important to organizing and leading good discussion. And then number 7 is you can kind of summarize what they're saying in that moment, and that helps to tell them that you're actively paying attention to what it is that they're saying. Well, this one is really important, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine. Don't allow Christianese in your group. What do I mean by that? Listen, Christianese is that lingo that comes up when you have been around Christians for a long time, maybe you've grown up in the church. There are words, there are phrases, there are things that we kind of use as our own Christian lingo that maybe non-believers, people that are new to the church, people have no idea what in the world that means. Let me give you some examples. Maybe you say, I'm in a season of singleness. Well, what does that mean? Or, man, I'm really going through the desert. Or, my life is filled with storms. You say, what in the world does that even mean? And I think here's the point. It's not that the phrases themselves are bad. It's just that you don't want to be content with just hearing that. You want them to think through what that is. Talk about what kind of storm are you facing? What does that mean exactly? What is it that you're struggling with in this season? Think through it. Tell me what's going on. If somebody says, I just need to read my Bible more, be like, okay, great, I do too, but like let's think a little bit deeper about the way that Christ is helping us grow. Because if you just remain in those shallow spaces, the Christians in your group will remain shallow. And so you want to draw them into deeper, authentic conversations where people can be open and raw about what's actually happening. Those kinds of Christian phrases can be really dangerous if that's all that's being shared, and it's kind of a veneer that you want to try to get past. So avoid simple cliches, ask follow-up questions to encourage that deeper thought. Contrary to popular belief, Jesus is not the answer to every question in your group. So make sure that you drive past the Christianese language and ask people more authentic kind of questions to really drive at what's going on in their life. Lastly here, keep your group on topic. When you are managing a group, you are responsible. Even when there's crazy things that come up, someone takes you down a wild rabbit trail about their Aunt Jenny, or maybe someone's really focused on Revelation right now and they're driving all kinds of eschatology conversation about how we're in the end times and how politics are consuming their every thought. Listen, we've all had those kinds of things in group context and nobody likes it because it's not very edifying, right? A lot of times these kinds of things can keep us away from the main point. And you as a facilitator, as the manager of your group, have to lovingly shepherd, bring those boundaries into focus so that people know what we're talking about and why. So don't allow the distractions or the things to keep people from really engaging with one another. Maybe someone's got a work call that comes up or a child who walks in the room. Listen, there's all kinds of ways that the group can get off topic, all kinds of distractions, but you have to bring those boundaries into clear perspective for people and rope it back in occasionally. Listen, don't be afraid to interrupt as well. It can be loving to just say, we're not going there right now. And we need to bring this back in and then ask another question that kind of brings it back into the way that you're wanting to lead the discussion. Keep it edifying. Keep control of the flow. Be present. Guide the group in a certain direction. Don't hesitate to respectfully interrupt. If someone begins to talk about something potentially harmful, sensitive, questionable, maybe someone's gossiping about someone else in the church. You can't have that. Maybe someone's saying that they don't like our pastor, or something. You never know what kinds of things might come up in your group, and you're responsible to lovingly say, we're not going to talk about that right now. Maybe you and I need to have a conversation later. And don't hesitate then to go to that person later and say, listen, I didn't mean to shut you down, but we can't be talking about that in group context. And if there are things that you're really wrestling with here, like we can talk one-on-one, but like you got to read the room and be sensitive to what's going on here. Don't hesitate to have those kinds of conversations. This is what it means to be a group leader. If that is intimidating to you and you really don't think that you're capable of doing that, I would say you need to really pray and think through whether this is a ministry place for you to serve in, because you need to be capable of having those kinds of conversations. It's part of protecting the group and just keeping the conversation edifying. If you can't manage it, if you don't want to be confrontational in a situation like that, then maybe we need to have a conversation about whether this is going to be a good fit for you or not. So really important stuff. Don't miss that. There are so many opportunities that you're going to have for questions. I want to encourage you that you come to me with any questions you have about this training video. If there are things that you're like, I'm not really positive what that means, or I'm not sure how to do that, can you work that out more? Awesome. Like, let's have a conversation. Let's get on the phone, send me an email, whatever. I want to talk to you. Our staff is here to help you. And I'm so grateful that you have volunteered to step into this space and to be able to help people grow in their faith. Remember that our mission and purpose is to make wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ that know him and that make him known. And in group ministry, we really are doing this relationally. This is a relational venture as we're growing together and ultimately loving Christ more deeply. So that's all that I've got for you in this video. I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and looking forward to more opportunities for discussion and growth for you as you learn more what it means to be a good discussion leader. God bless.